When I first arrived in Summerfield Estates, the pristine lawns and pastel-colored houses instantly reminded me of a storybook. Neat rows of magnolia trees lined the curved streets, their white blossoms wafting a pleasant fragrance in the balmy afternoon air. The real estate agent had boasted that Summerfield Estates was among the city's most idyllic, family-friendly communities, though it came with a well-organized homeowners association, a detail I brushed off as typical of modern American suburbs. My decision to move here was only partly about the neighborhood's reputation. As Dr. Allison Morrow, I'm known in certain circles for my work in end-of-life care. Particularly, I champion the expansion of hospice and palliative services to underserved communities. Over 2 decades, I have lectured at national conferences, run philanthropic campaigns, and even appeared on talk shows to discuss the importance of compassionate care for individuals with terminal illnesses. Despite my public profile, I generally keep a low profile in everyday life, hoping for a peaceful environment outside of my advocacy work. I was attracted to Summerfield Estates in part because of an exciting new development. The City Council had approved the construction of 2 small hospice houses near the residential area, as well as an outpatient counseling center for families in need of grief support. This expansion was a cause I personally supported, having provided guidance to the organization leading the effort. Rather than buy a place far from these facilities, I wanted to reside close by, offering guidance and any assistance as the hospice network grew. From the moment I started unpacking boxes, neighbors were welcoming. A retired schoolteacher brought me cookies. A young couple invited me to their barbecue. It all seemed perfect. Yet, a single name soon echoed in wary whispers. Ms. Barbara Arnsdale, commonly referred to, behind her back, as Karen. Evidently, she was the formidable president of the Summerfield Estates HOA. She's devoted to rules, the retired teacher said diplomatically, exchanging a knowing look. Just be sure you know the guidelines. She likes to enforce them, sometimes aggressively. I didn't pay it too much mind at first. An HOA president who insisted on mowed lawns or standard paint colors hardly bothered me. But I had no idea how much havoc Karen would cause, especially when she discovered a certain hospice expansion that she deemed unacceptable for her meticulously manicured community. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in my front yard, wrestling with some potted roses that needed transferring to the garden bed, when a tall, angular woman in her late 40s strode up my driveway. She wore pressed khaki slacks, a pastel blouse, and clutched a leather binder with gold initials. The moment she approached, I recognized the controlled, purposeful gait of someone used to giving orders. "Good afternoon," she greeted, forcing a polite smile. "You must be Dr. Morrow. I'm Ms. Barbara Arnsdale, president of the HOA. But around here, you can call me Ms. Arnsdale." I set down my trowel and removed my garden gloves. "Pleased to meet you, Ms. Arnsdale," I answered, offering a handshake. She hesitated before returning a limp handshake, as if touching dirt might sully her. "I see you've got some landscaping projects going on," she said, glancing pointedly at the roses. "I hope you're familiar with the guidelines about permissible plant species and color palettes. Also, we have restrictions on exactly how tall your shrubs can be. Can't block any safety sightlines." I forced a friendly nod. "I've read the basic HOA documentation, but if I have questions, I'll be sure to ask. I'm aiming to make everything look lovely, nothing out of line with the rules." Her eyebrows twitched slightly, as though she detected mild insubordination. But she pressed on. "Wonderful. I also wanted to make sure you received the welcome packet. It's about 30 pages detailing all the do's and don'ts in Summerfield Estates." I admitted I hadn't finished reading every page, but thanked her for the thoroughness. "I understand you're quite proud of the community," I added. "It's very beautiful here." She gave a thin smile. "Indeed, we strive to keep standards high. Summerfield Estates is known for uniform landscaping, minimal noise, and a quiet suburban charm that keeps property values strong." Before I could respond, her gaze shifted to the small sign on my mailbox that read, "Support Hospice Care." It was a discreet sign about the size of a standard yard placard. Her expression soured. "Oh," she said, "I noticed you have some sort of promotional sign. That might not be in compliance with the HOA's guidelines regarding signage. Do you plan to keep it indefinitely?" Slightly taken aback by her directness, I said, "Well, it's a simple sign showing my support for local hospice services. It's not political, not large or gaudy, just a small expression." She drew in a breath. Yes, but we have strict policies about signage, especially anything that might draw attention or look unseemly. She paused, as though searching for a polite facade. I can check with the design committee to see if we can grant an exception, but typically, we discourage personal statements in yard signs. I sensed my first warning. Karen was no ordinary neighbor. She was the type to micromanage every corner of the neighborhood, including personal expressions. Yet I remained calm. Thank you, I'll consider that. I appreciate you letting me know. Of course, she said, adjusting her binder. Remember, I'm here if you have questions. We want to preserve the harmony of Summerfield Estates. With that, she pivoted on her heel and left. A strange tension lingered, hinting that there was more to come. Little did I realize that this was just the opening salvo in a conflict that would soon revolve around the hospice centers being built nearby and her desperate attempts to keep them away. A few weeks passed. The rainy season gave way to warmer, sunnier days that saw construction of the Everlasting Care hospice houses ramp up. The nonprofit behind the project had secured all necessary city permits and was building 2 small homes designed for 6 to 8 terminally ill patients apiece. These houses would offer a warm, home-like atmosphere, 24-hour nursing support, and a place for families to be close to their loved ones in their final weeks or months. Construction wasn't happening inside Summerfield Estates proper. It was just adjacent, separated by a narrow greenbelt. In principle, the HOA shouldn't have had direct sway over the project. But that didn't stop Ms. Arnsdale from putting up a fuss. She began attending city council meetings to voice concerns about increased traffic, potential decline in property values, and unpleasant sights of medical vehicles. The council patiently reminded her that everything was done by the book and that hospice homes usually do not create huge disruptions. I continued living my life quietly, focusing on my day job with a regional hospice network and volunteering with the New Houses Board to help plan staff training and family support programs. Meanwhile, rumors in the neighborhood grew louder. Ms. Arnsdale was rallying a small contingent of residents with sensational claims that living near the terminally ill was depressing, would scare children, or would bring out-of-town visitors causing chaos on the streets. Disgusted, I sought ways to educate neighbors that hospice care is about compassion and dignity, not gloom and doom. But Karen's misinformation spread rapidly. On more than one occasion, I overheard residents quietly confiding. Karen says these hospice places are basically mini-hospitals with constant ambulances. Should we be worried? So, I arranged a small informational session at my house, inviting neighbors to learn the truth. Perhaps a dozen curious folks showed up. I explained how hospice focuses on comfort, pain management, emotional support for patients and families, and usually has minimal traffic or noise. Most left feeling reassured, promising they'd ignore Karen's scare tactics. But a handful seemed too intimidated by her to openly defy her. Summerfield Estates' monthly HOA meeting took place at the community center. I decided to attend, anticipating that Ms. Arnsdale might target the hospice again. Sure enough, halfway through the agenda, after discussing new speed bumps and a painting rule for garage doors, Karen cleared her throat. The final item. The board has received concerns regarding the proposed medical establishments bordering our neighborhood. We want to address the threat they pose to our property values and general environment. She clicked a small remote, projecting slides onto a screen. The slides used ominous language like potential increase in death-related activities and traffic from grieving families, as though hospice was some kind of nuisance or a moral hazard. Several residents shifted uneasily in their seats. One man, evidently a friend of Karen's, stood and announced, "We don't want to depress our children with funeral processions day in and day out. This will fundamentally alter the character of Summerfield Estates." My pulse pounded. I couldn't let these distortions go unchallenged. Rising from my seat, I said calmly, with respect, "Hospice care doesn't involve daily funeral processions or any of the gloom and doom scenarios you're imagining. It's a quiet, respectful environment that provides comfort to individuals in their final stages of life." Karen frowned. "Dr. Morrow, while I understand your perspective, many of us remain unconvinced. We have no desire to see any semblance of medical or terminal care overshadowing our community. If they want to provide end-of-life care, it can be done in a hospital far away." I took a breath. Many people prefer to spend their final days in a home-like setting. These small houses reduce stress for families, promoting dignity and peace. They're not intrusive, often far quieter than, say, a nursing home or busy clinic. Karen's lips tightened. But what about the negative image? People come to Summerfield Estates for tranquility, not to see hospice staff wandering around. Some might feel it's too somber. And from a purely financial standpoint, property values could be impacted if potential buyers are wary of living next to a facility where people die. She said it with chilling bluntness. Anger flared in me. I find it disheartening that you prioritize property values over compassionate care for the terminally ill, I retorted. Hospice is part of life. Everyone deserves dignity at the end, without being chased away by NIMBY attitudes. Several audience members clapped softly, though others looked tense. Karen quickly ended the discussion, stating that the board would be exploring legal avenues to halt or limit the hospice expansion. I left the meeting with my heart heavy. We were clearly on a collision course. Over the next few months, the hospice house construction progressed. The first building was nearly complete, while the second was finishing its interior work. Karen's rhetorical attacks grew more heated. She led a small but vocal group to protest outside the construction site with signs like "Keep Summerfield Estates Free of Hospice" and "Hospice equals lower home values." City officials repeatedly explained that the hospice's building permits were lawful and that the homes met all codes. But Karen persisted with a barrage of letters, phone calls, and petitions. She filed complaints claiming the hospice was effectively a hospital and should require special zoning. The city reviewed them and found no merit. When that failed, her group made up wild rumors that the hospice would store hazardous medical waste or that the staff were unlicensed. Inspectors arrived and left, satisfied everything was in perfect order. The nonprofit's leadership was exasperated, but also determined. They carried on, guided by the knowledge that their cause was just. Meanwhile, I tried to keep peace in my personal life. Karen's meddling extended even to my own property, sending me notices about improper mailbox decor, my small hospice support sign, and questionable backyard plants. She'd argue that my roses were overly large, approaching the 4-foot limit, a contrived rule in the thick HOA booklet. It was obvious she was grasping at straws. One Sunday afternoon, I was discussing patient intake protocols with a hospice nurse in my living room when we heard a loud knock. Opening the door, we found Karen standing there, arms crossed. "I noticed a car in your driveway with medical decals," she said, voice icy. "Are you conducting some sort of medical operation from your home? That's not allowed, you know. We have strict rules about running businesses from residences." My colleague, the hospice nurse, scowled. "I'm just visiting Dr. Morrow to discuss professional matters. We're not treating patients here." Karen's gaze snapped to me. "Then you should be aware that if I see repeated professional gatherings, I'll have to report it as unpermitted activity." The nurse started to retort angrily, but I gestured for calm. "Ms. Arnsdale, you have no right to forbid me from hosting visitors in my private home. We're not running a commercial business. This is a conversation between colleagues." She let out a derisive humph and marched off. Once she disappeared down the street, the nurse exhaled, shaking her head. "Wow, I've met some controlling HOA types, but this is next level." I rubbed my temples. She's fixated on controlling everything. And I suspect she's threatened by the idea that I'm an outspoken advocate who won't bow to her intimidation. Indeed, while I hadn't publicly trumpeted my national reputation as an end-of-life care champion in the neighborhood, word had begun to spread, perhaps fueling Karen's rancor. She might have realized she wasn't just dealing with an ordinary neighbor, but someone with professional clout who wasn't afraid to push back. At last, the first Everlasting Care Hospice house reached completion and prepared for a soft opening. The city granted its occupancy permit, and staff scheduled a small dedication ceremony. It would serve up to 8 patients in private rooms, each carefully designed to feel like a cozy bedroom rather than a sterile hospital unit. The event drew local press, church leaders, and supportive community members who recognized the importance of having a peaceful place for end-of-life care near families' homes. I attended in an official capacity as an advisor, delivering a brief speech about the dignity of hospice. But just as the ribbon was cut, a commotion erupted at the edge of the crowd. Karen and a handful of her supporters had arrived, holding signs that read, "Say no to hospice," and "Keep our neighborhood happy, not sad." Some turned their signs on me personally. "Dr. Morrow, don't bring death here." The blatant insensitivity stunned many onlookers. A reporter approached me, microphone in hand, whispering, "Can you comment on the protest?" I took a moment to gather my thoughts, keeping my composure. "Their message is misguided," I said calmly. "Hospice care is about compassion, ensuring that people in the final stages of life have comfort and dignity. It doesn't create disturbance. It's an essential service that meets a profound human need. Karen tried to butt in. Hospice belongs away from residential areas, preferably in a hospital or out in the countryside. We don't want it here. The reporter, seeing tension, quickly pulled back. A police officer on duty for crowd control gently ushered Karen's group behind a designated protest barrier. Meanwhile, the hospice staff tried to maintain a positive tone for the opening. Family members of new patients arrived, grateful for the resource, though unsettled by the hostility. I walked away feeling a swirl of emotions, anger at Karen's cruelty, sadness for those who might be deterred from seeking help. But I also recognized that we were successfully forging ahead. The house was open. The second one would soon follow. Karen's attempts to blockade the project had failed. She might grow even more desperate, and I feared what she might attempt next. Sure enough, Karen escalated. Unable to shut down the hospice through official channels, she resorted to more devious means. One Monday morning, staff discovered vandalism. Hateful graffiti scrawled on the hospice's sign, reading "Keep Death Out." Security cameras had captured shadowy figures at night, but they wore hoodies, making identification difficult. Police opened an investigation, suspecting it might be Karen's circle, though no direct evidence linked her personally. Then came a spree of phone harassment. The hospice's main line was flooded with bizarre calls claiming staff committed euthanasia or telling them to go back to the hospital. Some calls threatened lawsuits, others spewed vitriol. The staff morale dipped. Families became anxious. Our attorney advised collecting all call logs in case we needed a restraining order. I also found threatening notes taped to my mailbox, accusing me of profiting from death. It was as if Karen's fearmongering had emboldened a small fringe. I refused to let them intimidate me, but it weighed on my heart. Meanwhile, in Summerfield Estates itself, Karen continued her petty crusade against me. She filed repeated violations for my yard sign supporting hospice care, claiming it contravened the no signage rule. I responded with a letter stating it was smaller than the specified maximum size for personal expression, referencing the HOA's own guidelines. She threatened fines. My attorney friend said it was unenforceable, a form of harassment. Let her try, I said with a weary sigh. We'll fight it if needed. Word spread that Karen was planning something bigger. A neighbor who disliked her whispered to me that she'd overheard Karen bragging about a plan to get the county to condemn the hospice building. The notion was ludicrous, but after everything, I couldn't dismiss the possibility that she'd attempt sabotage. One sweltering afternoon, an unmarked van arrived at the newly opened hospice house. Out stepped two men in official-looking uniforms, bearing clipboards. They claimed to be from the County Health and Safety Bureau, demanding an immediate inspection. They threatened staff with closure if they didn't cooperate. Fortunately, the hospice director on site was sharp. She called the real county office to confirm. The official there had no record of any scheduled or unscheduled inspection. We never sent anyone, they said. Alarmed, the director discreetly phoned the police. By the time an officer arrived, the two men had fled in their van, likely sensing the ruse was exposed. Security camera footage captured one of them wearing a cap embroidered with SFE Department, Summerfield Estates. We suspected that Karen had orchestrated a fake inspection, hoping to find or fabricate code violations. While no direct evidence led back to her yet, the pattern was glaring. Once the news broke that imposters attempted an unauthorized inspection, the local press latched onto the story. Fake officials harassed neighborhood hospice, potentially linked to HOA protesters. Karen gave a terse statement to a reporter, denying involvement while doubling down on her stance. Clearly, I have no connection to these so-called inspectors. But my position remains that the hospice is an unwelcome facility in a peaceful neighborhood. The hospice's board grew fed up. They hired additional security and consulted an attorney about possible litigation against the HOA for harassment. The tipping point was near. If Karen didn't back down, she'd soon face a major backlash. Realizing the fight had become public, I decided it was time to speak out more boldly. A major local newspaper invited me to share an op-ed about hospice care in communities. In my piece, I described the life-affirming nature of hospice, its minimal burden on surrounding neighborhoods, and the heartbreakingly cruel opposition we'd encountered, spearheaded by certain HOA elements. I didn't name Ms. Arnsdale explicitly, but I didn't have to. Locals knew exactly who was behind the harassment. The piece went viral regionally. Allies emerged. medical professionals, spiritual leaders, families who'd lost loved ones in hospice, all denouncing the ignorant hostility. Karen's name began circulating in unflattering social media threads, with comments calling her a heartless busybody or the worst neighbor imaginable. Even some Summerfield Estates residents who once feared crossing her now spoke out, feeling empowered by the public tide. Karen responded with a press conference on the driveway of her immaculate two-story home. Her hair perfectly coiffed, she stood behind a small podium, flanked by the few remaining loyal supporters. She insisted she was only protecting the neighborhood from negativity. She claimed local property values were at risk, brandishing dubious real estate figures. She also accused me, without naming me specifically, of profiting off death and seeking attention. Yet this time, the media asked hard questions. Do you have proof hospice lowers property values? What about patients' rights to compassionate care? Is it not heartless to push away the terminally ill? Karen stammered, repeating talking points about children's mental health and atmosphere. The images of her floundering were broadcast widely. Public sentiment turned even more against her. Behind the scenes, city officials and the hospice's legal team were building a case against Karen and her circle for harassment. The police investigation into the fake inspectors also progressed. One suspect, caught by partial license plate recognition, revealed that Ms. Arnsdale had paid them under the table for an inspection job. But the final straw came when Karen made a brazen, illegal move. Late one evening, staff at the hospice's second building, now nearly ready for patients, arrived the next morning to find the doors and windows chained shut from the outside, with giant padlocks. A typed notice plastered to the door read, "This property is closed by order of the Summerfield Estates HOA. Violators will be prosecuted." Shocked, they called me. I rushed over. My stomach twisted at the cruelty. If actual patients had been inside, they'd be trapped. We contacted the police, who arrived with bolt cutters to remove the locks. The hospice had security footage from a side entrance, revealing two individuals in black hoodies, one matching the rough build of a known associate of Karen's. She had gone from intimidation to physically barricading a medical facility, a criminal act. Local authorities had seen enough. They secured a warrant to search Karen's home, suspecting they might find documentation linking her to the break-in. Sure enough, they discovered financial records, emails, and lists of action plans referencing the very sabotage that had occurred. She'd meticulously plotted each harassment tactic, forging orders to close the hospice. The city attorney promptly filed charges: breaking and entering, criminal mischief, harassment, fraudulent impersonation of an authority, and more. Karen was taken into custody one rainy afternoon, a humiliating spectacle as neighbors watched the police escort her out in handcuffs. She fumed, threatening lawsuits, proclaiming her innocence. But the mounting evidence was impossible to ignore. Karen's trial, held several months later, became a media sensation. Reporters filled the gallery to witness the downfall of the once intimidating HOA president. The prosecution painstakingly laid out the timeline: her repeated efforts to block the hospice, the fake inspection fiasco, the phone harassment, the vandalism, and finally, the padlocking of the second hospice house. Multiple witnesses testified, including hospice staff who recounted the trauma and fear inflicted on vulnerable families. Police investigators revealed details from Karen's computer, including emails instructing associates to create reasons for the county to shut down the hospice. They also revealed an Excel spreadsheet where she allocated HOA funds toward legal blockade of the hospice. Summerfield Estates residents were horrified to discover their dues had gone into illegal sabotage. For my part, I was called to testify on the intangible damage Karen caused: families postponing hospice admission due to fear, staff morale plummeting under constant harassment, and the emotional strain on dying patients forced to endure the drama. I also explained how important hospice was to the dignity of end-of-life care, and how Karen's actions threatened that dignity. In her defense, Karen's attorney tried to paint her as a misunderstood caretaker of the neighborhood who overzealously acted to protect residents. The argument fell flat. The evidence of malicious intent was overwhelming. The jury deliberated just one day before returning a guilty verdict on multiple counts, including felony trespass, conspiracy to commit fraud, and criminal mischief. During sentencing, The judge showed no sympathy. Ms. Arnsdale, your actions inflicted real harm on innocent people in the most vulnerable stages of life. You weaponized your authority in the HOA for personal prejudice. This court finds your behavior reprehensible. He handed down a prison sentence and hefty fines. Additionally, the hospice organization filed a successful civil suit, resulting in further financial penalties that threatened to bankrupt her. With Karen jailed and facing long-term legal consequences, a sense of relief swept through both Summerfield estates and the hospice communities. The HOA board ousted her from presidency, apologizing publicly for her abuses of power. The new leadership promised to abide by their rightful scope, maintaining neighborhood aesthetics and safety without interfering in medical or charitable services beyond their borders. The city assisted in reorganizing the HOA finances, ensuring that members' dues went toward legitimate neighborhood improvements rather than clandestine sabotage schemes. Meanwhile, the hospice houses thrived. Everlasting Care House No. 1 was at full capacity, serving terminally ill patients with warmth and compassion. Everlasting Care House No. 2, once forcibly locked by Karen's chains, opened smoothly, offering 8 more beds. Families spoke tearfully of how grateful they were to find peace for their loved ones in their final days, close to home. As for me, I continued my advocacy on a broader scale. The national attention drawn by Karen's arrest led to renewed conversations about the importance of community-based hospice facilities and the misguided fears that sometimes swirl around end-of-life care. I use my platform to highlight the heartbreak families face when they cannot access local, compassionate support. Karen had inadvertently helped fuel a wave of positive awareness and donations to hospice programs. One sunny Saturday, we held a dedication ceremony at Everlasting Care House No. 2 to honor all those who'd worked tirelessly to defend hospice from Karen's attacks. We planted a magnolia tree in the courtyard to symbolize resilience and compassion. Several patients, some in wheelchairs, some with oxygen tanks, watched from the porch, smiles on their faces. Their presence was a testament to everything we had fought for. A home-like environment where people could live out their remaining days in dignity. From time to time, neighbors asked me if I regretted moving to Summerfield Estates. My answer was always the same: no. Despite the turmoil, our stand against Karen reaffirmed the community's commitment to empathy. Her downfall demonstrated that cruelty born of misguided property concerns had no place overshadowing human decency. Eventually, Karen lost her home as well. The court seized her property to satisfy civil judgments. It was sold at auction, ironically purchased by a compassionate family who supported the hospice cause. Life returned to normal in Summerfield Estates, the tension lifted. People no longer whispered in fear of an overzealous HOA president. I sometimes drove by Karen's former house, remembering the intense battles we waged. But I felt no bitterness, only relief that justice had prevailed, and that hospice care in our city was stronger than ever. Indeed, the adversity had galvanized support from countless new volunteers and donors. In the end, we'd proven that love and compassion are mightier than the small-minded intimidation of a single Karen. Several years later, the hospice houses are integral fixtures of the neighborhood, cherished by families who need them. Summerfield Estates has become a model for how communities can coexist with essential services that, though often misunderstood, represent the best of humanity, caring for our most vulnerable members. Standing under the magnolia tree, listening to the serene laughter of visiting grandchildren in the courtyard, I smile, grateful that we refuse to yield to cruelty, and vindicated that the victory serves those who need comfort at life's end. Karen, meanwhile, remains a cautionary tale, a reminder that when arrogance and heartlessness collide with justice and compassion, compassion always wins. She tried to shut down neighborhood hospice centers, oblivious that I was a nationally recognized advocate for end-of-life care, armed with the moral and legal tools to thwart her. In the end, she not only lost her freedom, but also her property, ensuring she could never again threaten the dignity of those seeking peace in their final days.